Welcome to the Nothing or Triple Show, a podcast that knows that 10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck. I'm Ian.
And I'm Christian. So this is our reboot episode. We had something really good going for the first two episodes. Now it's time to start over.
Just kidding. On this episode, we want to talk about the whole concept of reboots, something that's done to death in Hollywood.
Yeah, it seems like there's a general criticism of Hollywood, and that's that there's no creativity left, right? That studios are constantly recycling the same franchises over and over. And I see the word reboot pop up multiple times a day on different websites that I read, and it's almost universally followed with fanaticism. Right, so people either get super psyched or super angry.
How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? But I think there are two reasons for that, right? So first of all, people form nostalgic attachments to movies, right? So, you think of your favorite movies from growing up or favorite series from growing up, and then you hear that somebody is going to reboot it. What does that mean, right? You're not supposed to mess with people's nostalgia. And in terms of the reboots that we've seen in the last couple of years or now a couple of decades, I guess, Hollywood has been really inconsistent on the quality level. And then the other reason is that the term, and this is what I really want to talk about, the term reboot is incredibly vague. So it, at the same time, tickles your imagination and causes deep anxiety. So you hear the word reboot and you want to know, are you going to see your favorite characters? Does the new story fit in the old mythology? Are the same actors coming back? Or what does it all mean? And as tends to be the case with Hollywood, they don't tell you up front. There's a general idea that they're going to reboot a property, and then there's just a ton of waiting to see what exactly that means.
Right. And then there's also the reverse of the nostalgia, right? So you have the reboots of the things that you already loved, and now you're afraid that they're going to ruin it. But then sometimes there was a movie property that may have started off with good intentions and then got botched, and now they're rebooting it, and maybe this time you'll be excited, right? Like, there are lots of popular properties, like they're kind of doing this weird pre-boot or something with the Transformers right now, where it started off strong and then kind of went off the rails, and now with Bumblebee, they're soft rebooting.
Yeah,
but that's the thing, is like die-hard Transformers fans want something that serves their original nostalgia, at least the ones of our age that remember the 80s cartoon and the 80s toys and stuff. So that's an example of the reverse, where there's this anticipation that, like, please don't screw it up again.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you said pre-boot and soft reboot in the same description. I have no idea what the hell either of those things mean.
That's Hollywood language, baby.
Right. And I think that's part of the problem, right? People want to know what they're going to get. And so I have a proposal, and that proposal is that we stop using the word reboot. We just stop. I think there are three or four other words that are far more descriptive. They already exist. They existed before the term reboot. They existed before computers were able to be rebooted. And I think if studios committed to using clearer language, there'd be a lot less concern on the internet, at least. Although now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe that's what they're going for anyway.
Yeah, you'll never get solve the concern on the internet. But yeah, you're proposing a logical course of action for Hollywood. So this is a cutting edge, rebellious tactic you're taking.
Okay, so let me tell you what the terms are. First of all, there's either prequel or sequel, right? So these are movies that are in direct linear succession to the original story, and they're generally focused on the primary characters from the original property, no matter how far separated by time. So you think of movies like the Star Wars episodes 1 to 3 or 7 to 9, Blade Runner 2049, which was 35, however many years later. You pick up Rick Deckard's character decades later, direct sequel. The Hobbit trilogy, direct prequel to the events of The Lord of the Rings. Richard Linklater's Before series, Before Sunset, Before Midnight. It's all following a single story. Finding Dory, The Color of Money, right? So that was, in today's Hollywood terms, that's the Martin Scorsese sequel to The Hustler. It's a sequel, follows Paul Newman's character. He's a supporting character this time. So in Hollywood today, they would call it a reboot, bringing a property back to life. But in fact, it is a direct sequel to the original.
There's a continuity.
Yeah. So it's not that hard, right? You have a prequel or sequel, or maybe there's a hybrid, like The Godfather 2, where part of it takes place before, part of it takes place after. But the events that happen in the original property matter, and you're following the same thing.
And they should probably you're proposing that they should make more of an effort in the terms that you're proposing to use in this first one. They should make more of an effort to try to make more sequels or prequels as opposed to just blinding reboots.
Well, I'm just saying that if that's what they're doing, they should be descriptive about it. So here's an example of just a couple weeks ago. Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, announced a Ghostbusters reboot, right? The internet lit up because of the last Ghostbusters movies we'll talk about in a minute. But this is a sequel to the original. It follows the events of the first two movies. It's however many years at this point, 30 years removed, but it is a sequel. Had they just said, we're making a sequel to Ghostbusters 2, this is Ghostbusters 3. Had they said that, everybody would have, well, not everybody would have gotten excited, but it would have been a lot clearer and people would have understood what was being proposed. Right. Instead, just the term reboot, people are, who's going to appear? Does it take place in the same universe? Like, questions like that. So I'm not necessarily proposing that either of these things is the best option, but this is one thing.
Right.
Prequel or sequel. The next in the same arena is a spinoff. And this, again, like a sequel or a prequel, takes place in the same universe as the original. So what happens in the original story matters for a spinoff. But in this case, it follows different characters who are sort of tangentially involved with the original. But the continuity is preserved. So this is something like a cinematic universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're all sort of spinoffs from each other, maybe originally from Iron Man or something like that. The new Men in Black movie with Liam Neeson and Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, that's a spinoff. Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones characters exist in that universe. So this is happening in the same space. U.S. Marshals, which was a spinoff from The Fugitive, like quasi-spinoff sequel. Get Him to the Greek, a sequel to Forgetting Sarah Marshall. 10 Cloverfield Lane. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, where they reference Robin Williams' character in the original. The Fantastic Beasts series takes place in the Harry Potter universe, but it goes off in a different direction.
And spinoff seems like it's got a lot of potential behind it. Like, it feels like it doesn't take that much effort to make a movie be in the same universe, be an entirely new thing with just a little bit of continuity, and you have that fan service, you have that nostalgia, but you can still get away with a lot of new ideas and new plot devices.
Yeah, they're interesting directions to take the story.
And so it seems like the best of both worlds without being confusing.
Right. Yeah, you preserve the original without starting over. So okay. So that, to me, I guess that's the big distinction. It all boils down to whether or not a new movie follows in the continuity of the original. So prequels, sequels, spinoffs do. The fourth and final term is remake. Right. So remakes cause a lot of panic. If you hear a movie's going to be remade, that means it's a clean break from the original. It's telling the same story again, but without any direct connection, narrative-wise, to the original.
But Christian, what about people at home that say, but what's the difference? Is remake, reboot the same thing? Like,
No, that's what I'm saying. So a remake doesn't take into account what happens in the story of a movie with the same name. So, for example, Bradley Cooper's A Star is Born. The story fits the same structure, but it has nothing to do with the other versions of that movie. Total Recall, the remake with Colin Farrell, has absolutely nothing to do with the Arnold Schwarzenegger masterpiece, aside from the source material.
Right.
It's a different telling of the same story that has no narrative connection. And then this was a controversial one. Ghostbusters, the one that came out in 2016, There's been a lot of conversation about how the backlash to that was sexist, and it was because people couldn't handle 4 women in the role. My personal feeling is that there was no need to remake the story. They told the exact same story
Right.
as the very first Ghostbusters movie without any connection to the original universe. When in fact, that could have been a spinoff. They could have been a
Right.
different franchise that exists in the same world where the Ghostbusters saved New York twice.
Right.
And that I think that would have been much better received.
Right.
than-
And it's
than-
unfair to assume they had anything to do with the cast because it's a very talented, competent cast. Any one of those actresses are very talented in their own right and would have been good in any movie. It's just it was that they were part of a concept that was problematic.
Right.
It had nothing to do with them.
Yeah. Okay. So, the one bit of nuance here is that sometimes you can mix the first 3 of these prequels, sequels, and spinoffs. So, like the Star Trek 2009 movie was a pretty clever sequel that followed on years after the events of Nemesis, but then there was time travel and it started a spinoff.
Right. But acknowledges the original timeline.
Right, because Leonard Nimoy's Spock is in it, and
Right.
the things that happen in the movies you've seen matter for this movie. So that's it. 4 terms: prequel, sequel, spin-off, remake. There's no need to use the term reboot. I can't think of a movie out there, a reboot out there that isn't described clearly by one of these terms.
Why do you think reboot has gotten so popular? Because I think when we were younger, nobody said reboot. I think it's relatively new term that's just become ubiquitous now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's trendy. I don't know. I mean, I do think to a certain extent that the studios want some creative flexibility, and so they'll look at some intellectual property that they own, some franchise that they have the rights to that's been sitting dormant, and they'll toss out the word reboot because they want to make more money off of that
Right.
franchise, and they haven't figured out how to do it exactly yet.
I have a theory that a reboot, the popularity of Hollywood, more specifically studio marketing teams using the term reboot, is probably related to all these groups trying to boot up connected universes, shared universes, because a remake may just be a one-off. A sequel might be a one-off, a spin-off might be a one-off, but a reboot to me almost feels like they're deliberately telling you we're starting over and we're going to do a lot. We're starting over and continuing on this new journey that may be several films. So like I wonder if we, I don't know if there's any way to correlate this, but if the popularity of everyone trying to create connected universes in the studio system, if that growth was parallel to the use of reboot.
I mean, I don't think so.
Okay.
I guess it's possible, but I think there have been a lot of remakes or properties that have just ignored what's come before it, and Hollywood calls them a reboot so that you remember that you love something about that property.
Right.
But like Total Recall's the example I used earlier, RoboCop with Joel Kinnaman from a couple of years ago is another one. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when they started that franchise again,
Right.
those were new movies and no continuity with the original. So it was a remake followed by a sequel to that remake.
I think I don't know. I guess my theory is just that, especially when they're franchises, it's not just like Total Recall was a one-off movie,
Mm-hmm.
but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a franchise, is a trilogy, and then they only made 2 of those, right, in the remakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and now they're doing another, starting from scratch again. So
Another reboot? Live action?
Another live action remake.
geez.
Yeah.
So they'll be tied for Spider-Man in 3 universes in a decade or something.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I hope that everybody listening will stop using the term reboot.
All right, so pick up your signs and revolt against the Hollywood system and insist that they use logical terminology instead of reboot.
Yeah.
At least in your own homes, you could help by defining these films for yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so the second topic for this episode, following the theme of reboot, is the Genie in the new Guy Ritchie live-action Aladdin movie. Right, so this movie is a remake. That's
Okay.
it. It's a remake
Got
of the animated Disney classic. It's not a reboot; it's a remake. And I think that term reboot here has generated a lot of passion. People are super nostalgic about the original. They feel a special connection to Robin Williams' character. I think his legacy as an actor is very much tied up in the role of Genie, and he's not around anymore, unfortunately, to speak on behalf of that character. My sense is that the general concern about touching that property at all as a remake or sequel or whatever, like in this case a remake, it's manifested itself in I don't know, a general assumption that there's no way for this movie to succeed. So you hear that stupid phrase that the movie's going to ruin somebody's childhood. No, it's not. That's not how movies work. But
yeah, so Aladdin, like many of these classic Disney films from our childhood, is on a beloved place on my shelf, and I am excited but cautious because for the same reason that a lot of people are concerned. But let's review history. I had no interest seeing another Joker after Jack Nicholson, and when they announced that Heath Ledger would be Joker, I'm like, it's going to be crap. It's going to be garbage. And it turns out that not only was it one of the best Batman films, it was one of the best films ever made. Heath Ledger won a posthumous Oscar for his Joker. So that was a case where there was a role that I thought I had decided the person that played it could not be outdone. Heath Ledger's Joker does not undermine Jack Nicholson's. They're different performances. And so I think the lesson that we can learn there are two lessons that we can learn from this is, one, don't judge a movie before you've seen it. and if you're going to hate on it, watch it first and then decide with some level of forced objectivity. And then your love, just like my love for Robin Williams as the Genie, can stand on its own because this is going to be a different thing. Yes, it's the same character. Yes, it's a similar story, but Will Smith is not going to do a Robin Williams impression. William Smith, William T. Smith, I don't know what his middle name is. He's going to do his version of the Genie, and we're just going to have to let that ride and see what he and Disney and Guy Ritchie pull off.
Yeah, so on the subject of waiting until you've seen things, Disney has been pretty mysterious with the marketing for this movie. There was a teaser out in, I don't know, like December or something like that shows a caravan going to the Cave of Wonders, but you don't see the Genie. And finally, they just released this past week a very strange clip during, I don't remember, like a game show or something. Anyway, something like primetime special look at Aladdin. It's a 30-second TV spot. It's the first, which is an unusual way of giving a big first look at an anticipated movie.
Yeah, it felt like it was meant to come out at the Super Bowl, and I think they played it at the Grammys.
The Grammys, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So you finally see Will Smith's blue Genie, and it looks a little bit strange. But you see him for like 3 seconds, maybe even 2 seconds. The CGI clearly isn't finished yet. And the internet just erupted, saying, not my Genie. This is, like, how could he possibly try to follow in Robin Williams' shoes? And yeah, to your point, I think, well, first of all, Disney has never, ever, in my mind, messed up spectacle. Even in movies where the story hasn't been perfect, they've always gotten the look and feel. They've always invested in the right talent to create a visually interesting and beautiful
it's going to look good.
Right. And so we got a couple months until it comes out. So I hate the fact that they rushed this first look out before the Genie was done. But I think it's going to be
why?
Okay.
You know why our first look of Will Smith as the Genie is this Genie? And it's because what was it? Was it Vanity Fair? They had these covers came out a couple months ago.
Yeah.
That had the cast of the film, and I'm assuming it was Aladdin and Jasmine. I don't think Jafar was on it, but behind them was Will Smith, not blue. He was in costume, and he looked like a regular human, non-Genie Will Smith. Not regular. I mean, he had a crazy goatee and top knot hairpiece, but
some regular humans have crazy goatees and top knots.
Yeah. A little irregular for the Fresh Prince, but anyway, there was a huge internet reaction to those covers. Why isn't he blue? The Genie is blue. He's got to be blue. And so I feel like we saw a blue Will Smith in this teaser simply because the internet was screaming, "Give us a blue Genie or else." And so they're like, okay, but you don't understand the context of how this genie fits in this movie. So
Wait, are you suggesting that he wasn't originally intended to be blue?
No. I think he is definitely intended to be blue in the scene that we saw.
Yeah.
I suspect that he's not going to be blue for the majority of the film.
Yeah.
And they don't have a ton of footage that they would have put in a trailer with him that is blue. It's probably probably a low ratio, I'd suspect.
Yeah.
Because they're going for a little bit more realism in these live action Disney films.
Yeah.
Than the animated version.
Yeah. All right. We'll know more when the movie comes out in May. And in between now and then, shut up, internet.
Impossible.
Yeah, impossible.
That's one of my 3 wishes.
Just chill out. Okay. And the final topic for this episode on the subject of reboots.
Future reboots in
Future
this case.
reboots. And then after this episode, I'll stop saying
so
reboot.
It'll be, we're talking about a remake.
Yeah.
Another remake.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, ooh, this one's interesting.
If it's in continuity,
spin-off. Yeah.
it's a spin-off. Well, it's a remake of the originals made to fit. Thereby, it's also a spin-off.
Yeah.
In the way that Spider-Man was.
Let's see how long we can talk about this without naming the franchise.
Well, it's got...
I give up. We're talking about X-Men. So the Disney-Fox merger finally went through, and Disney is getting the rights back to all the X-Men characters and all the Fantastic Four. And if you've been paying any attention to the X-Men films in the last couple of years, you'll know that they're a bit of an effing mess.
This is another example where X-Men started strong. They were never perfect, especially if you were like a pretty solid X-Men fan of either the animated series or the comic books. The movies were never spot on, but they were the X-Men movie we got. And so initially, including myself, a lot of fans were on board. But they've been up and down, and they've been kind of exponentially falling off the rails.
Yeah, the continuity is a total mess, right? So I don't even want to get into it. The continuity just doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all.
Well, fortunately, because of the Fox merger, we have an opportunity for a new X-Men.
Yeah. I think the Fox movies have really botched some main characters like Cyclops and Jean Grey and Storm and Iceman. There's been way too much time spent on the Professor Xavier-Magneto relationship, way too much mystique with Jennifer Lawrence. I get, they wanted to elevate that character because she became a huge star after they had already signed her on to the movies, but she's not really a big part of the comics. So,
who's your favorite X-Men?
In the movies or in...
like before the movies, when you're a kid and you're like, I can't wait to see a movie with my favorite X-Man.
Yeah. Oh, damn it. I'm trying to think of something funny to say, but it's Cyclops. Cyclops is so cool.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You're like a Cyclops. Kind of likes to follow the rules and press the teacher and
blast people with my laser vision.
Yeah. But the Cyclops was such a like a tightwad. Like,
yeah,
he was always cramping Wolverine style.
Who was your favorite character?
It was definitely Wolverine. I had affinity for a lot of other characters, but Wolverine was my favorite. And Hugh Jackman does an amazing Wolverine. The only problem with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is that he's too tall to be Wolverine. If he had been a foot shorter, he would have been like comic perfect.
Yeah.
But I asked this because my biggest disappointment in X-Men was Rogue. Rogue was so far removed from the Rogue that I loved in the comics. And we didn't get a Gambit until like a weird supporting role in one of the other spinoff. But
X-Men Origins, Wolverine.
Yeah. Anyway, I admit, like I had a full-on crush on a comic book character that was Rogue.
That's weird.
She was attractive. She was a badass. She had this this country accent. She could fly. She was pretty BA, and she was the exact opposite in the movie. So
now we have that on tape.
So I'm really looking forward to a new Rogue.
Okay, so here's where we are. Disney now owns Fox. Fox has a couple of X-Men projects in the pipeline. So Dark Phoenix, which is a sequel to X-Men Apocalypse and X-Men Days of Future Past and First Class, which has undergone a whole bunch of reshoots, tons of money spent on trying to fix the movie. Still testing really poorly, but theoretically it's coming out in June. There's New Mutants, Josh Boone's like horror take on some X-Men characters, and that is supposed to undergo reshoots. It got delayed by like an entire year, and now there are rumors that it's just going to be dumped on Hulu because it's sort of an unsalvageable mess. Ryan Reynolds said that Deadpool 3, despite how successful the first two were, probably isn't going forward. The X-Force movie that Drew Goddard was supposed to direct is no more. Channing Tatum's Gambit movie, which he's been trying to make for like 5 years or something, like did photo shoots with him for Vanity Fair years ago, and that's not happening. So my sense is the writing's on the wall for the X-Men franchise, and Lauren Schuller Donner, who's been the Fox producer overseeing the X-Men franchise, former boss of Kevin Feige from Marvel, she said that she's handed over the reins.
Is it Feige or Feige?
Feige. Oh, gosh.
The yogurt is Feige.
I don't know. We'll have to invite him
or
on the
Feig.
show to...
Kevin Feige.
I think we should invite him on the show to tell us, because I think he's the most valuable person in Hollywood.
The most valuable person in Hollywood, Kevin F.
Yeah.
However you pronounce your last name.
Anyway, this is the mastermind behind the Avengers universe, right? Starting with Iron Man and building up to this massive interconnected universe of spin-offs and sequels and prequels.
And awesomeness.
Right. And so now the opportunity is to bring X-Men characters into that universe.
Finally.
Finally, right? So sort of like they were finally able to get Spider-Man from Sony. Now they finally have all of these amazing X-Men characters who, frankly, I think can be as valuable to Disney as the entire Avengers team is. So because Marvel is so focused on consistency and continuity, I can't imagine they're going to try to make sense of what we've seen on screen so far.
Right.
I think they're going to start over. I think they're going to remake the franchise. And I think...
remake them as spin-offs.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's a huge undertaking, because the entire concept of X-Men is that there are mutants and then there are non-mutants, right? There are people who have superpowers because they're mutants, and then the rest of the world. Mutants don't exist in the current MCU. Who knows what can happen with the various Infinity Stones? Maybe something narratively clever could happen because of that. But here's the thing. You need a very smart and talented and visionary director to take over this franchise, and I have a proposal for who that should be.
Ooh.
Can you guess?
Is it the director that made the best Marvel film so far?
Mark Steven Johnson, who did Daredevil?
Wrong.
Oh.
Would you like to try again?
No, I give up.
Who would have thought that, in my opinion, the best, and in probably many people's feelings, at least one of the best movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be a sequel, the third installment to the Thor franchise.
Right.
The Thor Ragnarok, directed by Taika Waititi.
Right. So you've heard him, I think you heard us talk about him on the last episode. He's one of our favorite directors out in Hollywood right now. And his name came up recently because, James Gunn was fired from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Thor Ragnarok borrowed a certain aesthetic, I think, from Guardians of the Galaxy. Taika Waititi was rumored to take over Guardians of the Galaxy 3. He said he had been in conversations with Marvel, and then he came out and said, I can't take over James Gunn's property.
Yeah, his fingerprints are all over it. It's too much of his baby.
Right. So Thor Ragnarok, to me, was a perfect test run to see what he could do as a director. Really, an indie director came into Hollywood and made the very most of the opportunity. He was able to put his own unique spin on a Marvel movie. And I think he's the perfect person to take over the X-Men franchise. Not to just do an X-Men movie, but to serve in the creative capacity that the Russo brothers or Joss Whedon or even James Gunn for the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movie did, where he can shepherd in this franchise. He knows how to do the tone. The one thing that X-Men movies have not been so far is fun, aside from Deadpool, but the main X-Men movies, they need to be fun.
part of me is like, oh man, if only Taika had been around sooner, because there are some of the Marvel movies that weren't as good as Ragnarok, and he got a hold of that franchise kind of at its end. So it's really exciting to think of him potentially being a contender to spearhead the beginning of a new band.
Yeah. So you think that would be a good idea?
I think it'd be amazing.
Okay. All right. So we are starting 2 campaigns on this show. One is the campaign to ban the term reboot, and the other is Taika Waititi for X-Men.
Taika Waititi for the spin-off remake of X-Men.
Yeah. And hell, if they don't give him X-Men, Disney owns Fantastic Four now, so that would be another great property for him.
Yeah. Give him all.
Yeah, give him everything. Okay. That wraps up this episode. We could talk about reboots for a lot longer, but I don't think I want to. I think I just want to stop saying that word.
Maybe we'll reboot this episode later.
Yeah, we've already used that joke in this episode.
Yeah, but if we're anything like Hollywood, we'll do it anyway.
Maybe we'll have a sequel episode.
Sequel, remake, spin-off.
Or a prequel episode. How might that work?
Ooh, with time travel.
So thanks for listening. If you haven't done so already, we would love for you to subscribe to the Nothin or Triple Show. Check out our website, nothinortriple.com.
Where can they find the podcast?
On the internet.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere podcasts are found. Here and here and here. Everywhere.
Oh, yeah. I guess we should tell people, just in case they're insane, that the quote at the beginning of the episode about a crick in the neck, that was because we knew we were going to be talking about Genie.
That's right.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody got that.
If you want to see a repeat of some of these ideas in the written form, you can see those on the website.
Maybe with a little bit more depth.
How about, do we want to open up comments yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Because we could let people comment on your post.
Are you kidding me? So if we open comments on a blog post about reboots, that we would invite an army of trolls in.
Okay. Speak amongst yourselves.
Are you talking to me?
No. Potential trolls.
All right.
Keep it to yourself.
Okay. That's it.
All right.
I'm hanging up now.
Farewell.